My fiancée and her family planned to steal everything from me. I secretly learned their language, recorded their conversations, and sent them all to prison. I'm 28 years old. I work in tech, and about a year and a half ago, I was about to marry someone who literally just wanted to steal everything I have. And when I say steal from me, I'm not talking about a gold digger girlfriend who wanted me to pay the bills. I'm talking about a complete family criminal operation, with detailed plans and everything. I know it sounds like a bad movie, but I swear it happened. And there are still days when I can't believe I was so stupid. I guess I should start at the beginning. I met Yulia on a dating app like 3 years ago, maybe a little more. She was 26, super pretty, and seemed genuinely interested in me, not just physically, but in my interests, my work, all that stuff. The first dates were amazing, honestly. We'd talk for hours, we had things in common, and there was something about her that made me feel special, like she really cared. She came from an Eastern European country, had come to the United States with her family when she was like 18 or 19, and worked in something like accounting or finance. I don't remember exactly what. Her English was perfect, almost no accent, which I thought was impressive because she always said she'd learned quickly. The first few months were great. We'd go out on weekends, watch movies, cook together at my apartment. She was living with her parents at the time, which seemed a bit odd for a 6-year-old, but she explained that in her culture it was normal to stay home until you got married. And I thought, well, every culture is different. I'm not going to judge. I met her parents like 6 months into dating. Her mom, Nina, was like super intense, always asking questions about my job, how much I made, if I had savings, if my parents owned property. At the time, I attributed it to her being a protective mother, wanting to make sure her daughter was with someone stable. Her dad, Grigori, was quieter, but he also made me feel like he was evaluating me all the time. After a year and a half together, I proposed. I know, it was probably too fast, but I was almost 27 at the time and felt like it was time to settle down, and she seemed like the right person. She said yes, obviously, and everyone was happy. My parents, Jeffrey and Helen, met her a couple of times and said she seemed nice, though my mom mentioned once that she thought Yulia asked a lot of questions about our family's financial situation. I brushed it off. Like, Mom, you're being paranoid, curious people exist. This is where things started getting weird. Like 2 weeks after the engagement, Yulia said we should move in together, which seemed logical to me since we were engaged and all. But then she said we should move into her parents' house temporarily while we saved up to buy something of our own. I said it made sense from a financial standpoint, even though my apartment was perfectly adequate for both of us. But she insisted a lot, saying her parents had plenty of space, that we could save a lot of money, and that, besides, it was important to her family that we live with them before the wedding because, again, culture and traditions and all that. I moved in like 3 weeks later. At first, everything seemed normal. I mean, normal within how uncomfortable it is to live with your in-laws. They had a big house in the suburbs, like 4 bedrooms, and they gave us a room to ourselves. But from day one, I noticed something weird. Nina and Grigori talked all the time in their language, and when I walked into the room, they'd suddenly switch to English, but you could tell it was forced. Yulia also started speaking more in her language with them, which seemed normal to me, but there were moments when I felt like they were talking specifically about me. The thing is, I didn't understand a single word of what they were saying. Their language was one of those Eastern European ones that sound super harsh, with consonants I didn't even know existed. At first, I tried asking Yulia what they were saying, and she'd always give me vague answers like, oh, they're just talking about dinner, or they're commenting on something from the news. But their expressions and tone didn't match those simple explanations. Sometimes Nina would look at me while talking to Yulia, and I swore they were talking about me, but I couldn't prove it. Like a month into living there, Nina started making comments about money. Subtle at first, like, Benjamin, you should open a joint account with Yulia now that you're engaged, or, Benjamin, are your parents going to help with the wedding, or are you guys paying for everything? I'd tell her we hadn't decided those details yet, and she'd insist, saying it was important to plan ahead. Yulia also started asking me more often about my finances, how much I had saved, if I had investments, if my job offered bonuses. I started feeling uncomfortable, but I thought maybe I was being too sensitive, because living with your in-laws is obviously stressful. It was like in the second month when I decided to do something that probably sounds paranoid, but I swear I had reasons. I started taking classes in Yulia's language secretly. I found a teacher online, like Zoom, and took classes twice a week when I was supposedly working from home in my room. I told Yulia I had long meetings. The language was difficult. Very difficult. But I was motivated because I needed to know if they were talking about me or if it was just my paranoia. The teacher taught me basic phrases first, but I asked her to specifically teach me vocabulary related to money, marriage, plans, that kind of stuff. Like 2 months into taking classes, I started catching random words in Nina and Yulia's conversations. I didn't understand everything, but I heard words I recognized: money, account, bank, date, time. One night they were talking in the kitchen while I was supposedly watching TV in the living room, and I heard my name several times. Nina was talking fast and seemed frustrated, and Yulia was responding in a defensive tone. It was like a week later when what basically changed everything happened. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'd gone out for a run and came back like half an hour earlier than planned. When I walked into the house, I heard loud voices coming from Grigori's study on the second floor. It was Nina and Yulia, and they were arguing heatedly in their language. Normally I would have gone up to the bedroom, but something made me stop. I took out my phone, opened the voice recording app, and started recording. I stood there in the hallway for like 10 minutes while they kept yelling at each other. I didn't understand everything, but I definitely heard words I'd learned: wedding, bank, wait, hurry, access, account. When the conversation ended, I quickly went up to the bedroom before they could see me. Yulia came in like 5 minutes later. She looked upset but tried to hide it. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said it was just family stress, nothing important. That night, I could barely sleep. I had that recording on my phone and needed to know what it said, but I couldn't use an automatic translator because the audio quality was bad and there was a lot of background noise. Turns out at my work, there was a girl, Emma, who was from a country near Yulia's and spoke the same language. We'd never been super close, just colleagues who said hi in the hallway. But she knew I was engaged to someone from her region because once she saw a photo on my desk and made a casual comment. On Monday, I went to work and asked her if we could talk privately. I explained the situation. Like, I know this is going to sound super weird, but I have a recording and I need to know what it says. I think my fiancé is hiding something. Emma agreed to help me. We went to an empty conference room and I gave her my phone with headphones. She listened for like 5 minutes, and her face gradually changed. First confusion, then surprise, then like horror. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "Benjamin, you need to get out of that house now." I asked her what it said, and she started translating. Basically, Nina was scolding Yulia because it had been almost 3 months, and they still hadn't gotten me to add Yulia to my bank account or give her access to my savings. Nina was saying things like, "You should already have full access to his money. The plan was that before the wedding you'd have everything ready, and what if he figures it out before time?" Emma kept translating, and I felt like I was going to pass out. Yulia was responding to Nina that I was more careful than expected, that it wasn't as easy as with others, and that she needed more time. Nina was saying they didn't have more time, that others were progressing faster, and that if Yulia didn't get access soon, they'd have to consider ending everything and starting over with someone else. There were references to other names, people I didn't know, and Emma explained that it seemed like they were talking about other victims, other men in the same situation as me. I couldn't breathe properly. I asked Emma to send me a written translation of everything and left the office. I went home, well, to my old apartment that I still had, luckily, because I hadn't ended the lease. I sat there for hours trying to process what I'd just discovered. My fiancée, the woman I was going to marry, the person I trusted completely, was involved in some kind of organized family scam. And it wasn't just her, it was her whole family. And apparently I wasn't the first. That night I called my parents. I told them everything, sent them the recording and Emma's translation. My dad, Jeffrey, was silent for a moment and then said, "Son, we're coming over right now." They arrived like at 11 at night at my apartment. My mom, Helen, was crying, saying she knew. Something wasn't right, but didn't want to be the typical meddling mother-in-law. We decided we needed more solid evidence before doing anything legal, but that I definitely couldn't go back to that house. I sent Yulia a message saying I'd had a work emergency and was going to stay at my apartment for a few days. She responded quickly, asking what was wrong, if she could come see me, if I needed anything. I told her no, that I just needed to focus on an urgent project. During the next 3 days, with Emma's help and her husband, who also spoke the language, we started investigating. Emma confessed to me that she'd heard rumors in the immigrant community about families who did this kind of thing, that they basically targeted financially stable American men, made them fall in love, married them or convinced them to give access to their accounts, and then disappeared with the money. I went to the police with the recording, the translation, and all the information I had. Officer Russell, who took my case, told me this was more common than I thought, but that it was difficult to prove without more evidence. He suggested I try to go back to the house, act normal, and collect any documents or physical evidence I could find. I was scared, honestly, but I knew I needed to do it. I went back to Nina and Grigori's house 2 days later, saying my work project was resolved. Everyone acted super normal, asking how I'd been, if I needed anything. Yulia was particularly affectionate, which now I understand was part of the plan to keep me hooked. During the next 2 weeks, I started taking photos of everything I saw. I found documents in Grigori's study when I supposedly went to the bathroom. There were folders with names I didn't recognize, bank transfer records, even photos of other men who seemed to be from dates or social events. One night, while everyone was sleeping, I went down to the study and took photos of everything. There was a folder specifically labeled with my name, and when I opened it, I felt nauseous. It was all there. Copies of my driver's license that I'd left lying around, information about my job they'd collected from my LinkedIn, even a document that seemed to be a detailed plan with dates and financial objectives. There were handwritten notes in their language that Emma would later translate for me, saying things like, has estimated savings of X amount, parents with property in Y place, high inheritance potential. With all that evidence, I went back to Officer Russell. He stayed quiet looking at the photos and then said, "This is enough to start a formal investigation." Turns out Nina and Grigori already had a history, not under those exact names, but there were records of suspicious activities linked to them in other states. They'd been running this scheme for years, moving from city to city, probably when things got too hot in one place. My dad and Russell coordinated a plan. One morning, while Nina, Grigori, and Yulia were at the house, the police arrived with a search warrant. I was already out. I'd supposedly gone to work, but was actually at the police station. They found everything: computers with more information, documents from other victims, bank accounts with suspicious transfers. They arrested all 3 right there. The legal process lasted months. Turns out there were at least 5 other men in similar situations, some who had lost thousands of dollars, one who had lost almost 100,000. I was lucky, I guess, to discover it before they achieved their objective. Yulia, Nina, and Grigori faced multiple charges: fraud, conspiracy, I don't know how many more. In the end, Nina and Grigori received prison sentences of several years, and since they weren't citizens, they'd face deportation afterwards. Yulia received a lesser sentence because prosecutors argued she'd been manipulated by her parents since she was young, but she still went to prison for a while and would also be deported. The whole process was exhausting. I had to testify, review all the evidence over and over, face Yulia in court. She looked at me during her testimony and tried to say she really loved me, that things had gotten out of control, that she didn't mean to hurt me. But I didn't believe anything she said anymore. The person I met probably never really existed. She was just a character designed to manipulate me. I spent like 6 months in therapy after all that. I couldn't trust anyone. I was scared to meet new people, especially women. Every time someone asked me a question about my work or finances, I'd get super defensive. My parents were incredible throughout everything. They let me stay with them for a while, supported me through every stage of the legal process. Now it's been like 8 or 9 months since everything ended. I went back to my apartment, resumed my life, and I'm working on rebuilding my ability to trust people. Emma and I became good friends after all this. She literally saved me from losing everything. I've been on a couple of dates. Nothing serious. but at least I don't panic anymore every time I meet someone new. What I took away from this whole experience is that the signs were there from the beginning. The questions about money, the insistence on moving in with her family, the conversations in another language they never wanted to translate. I ignored them because I was in love, or what I thought was love. Now, I know that real love doesn't come with constant pressure about finances or with families that evaluate you like you're an investment. Last week, I got a letter from prison. It was from Yulia, asking for forgiveness, saying she'd really felt something for me at some point. I read it once and threw it in the trash. I don't know if any part of what we lived through was real, and honestly, I don't care anymore. What matters is that I got out of that situation before it destroyed me financially, and that other men were also able to recover some of what was stolen from them, thanks to the investigation. I still have bad days, days when I wonder how I could have been so blind. But I guess that's part of the healing process. At least now I know what signs to look for. And believe me, I'm never again going to ignore that feeling in my stomach that tells me something isn't right. That intuition I ignored so many times during those months, living with them. Now I know I should have listened to it from the beginning.